Okay, so last week I did a video on using jelly gouache for the first time, and although I liked that drawing, it didn't come out as great as I wanted it to be. So what I did this week was study other artists and how they used gouache instead, like in detail, and then applied some of what I learned from other artists onto my work, and I think it worked out pretty well. So maybe this method will work for you guys too. So yeah, let's get started. So for this illustration, I'm going to be using Nikki because usually whenever I like to test out some drawings, he's the test subject. So there's that. I also wanted to note that the look that I was going for in this drawing is very Zoot suit inspired. For those of you who don't know what a Zoot suit is, it's a men's suit with a high-waisted, wide-legged, tight-cuffed peg trousers and a long coat with wide lapels and wide padded shoulders. The suits were first originated within African-American communities like in Harlem, Chicago, and Detroit in the 1930s, and eventually jazz popularized them, and by the 1940s, a lot of other people and cultures were wearing the suit. The suit caused like some controversy in some areas, and is still banned in some places as well in some states in America. It was considered unpatriotic because of the excessive amount of fabric used on them. But I think that it was a cool look, and I think people just hating, honestly. That's the best way to put it, is people were just hating on the suit. I suggest giving the history of the suit a nice read on Wikipedia. It's real quick, and honestly, it's important to know sometimes where the culture of fashion comes from and the history that it takes upon it. My version right here is more of a modern day Zoot suit, so something that, although includes the elements like the high waist and the big lapels and the long coat, it also includes newer age elements like the sweater underneath instead of a form-fitting shirt, and I think he's got some gloves on, which I don't know if they would wear gloves with them traditionally, so I guess the accessories were dependent on person to person as well. Okay, now that we've talked about the drawing, let's talk about how I use the gouache this time. Just noting again that this is how I thought I used them, right and wrong, so maybe you guys do it a different way, and that's totally cool too. Everyone has a different process or method of using gouache. Okay, so there were two things that I think I did wrong last time, especially after gathering enough information and actually studying what people did. My first issue was that I was laying down the paint way too thick. You see, when you lay down paint too thick, it doesn't allow room for movement within the painting. What does that mean? It means that the paint will just kind of create this surface blob on there, and it won't move because there's no almost like binding some substance to move it. So like in this case, the binding substance is water. Since there was no water to move it, it just kind of clumped up in one area and then looked bumpy and just not smooth. And I was like, dang, I kind of wanted it to look smooth. That also caused another issue within the painting, which was cracks. And I'm thinking because the paint was so not watered down, it caused it to dry up and then eventually give it all those cracks within the drawing, and I was upset that that happened. But realistically, if I'm using something for the first time and trying to get used to it, I was expecting something wrong to happen along the line. The second thing I did wrong, which I noticed when I was painting it, but I didn't realize how big of an issue it was until I got to my second drawing, was that I was not letting the paint dry, or like not giving it enough time to dry, and then constantly layering it on top. You see, because I wasn't giving enough time for the paint to dry, the paper ended up getting beat up really bad last time, so eventually it started to kind of like pill up because I was just layering and layering and layering, when gouache doesn't work like that because, well, number one, the water within gouache is going to eventually beat up the paper long enough, and number two, paper can't really handle a lot of water in general. Even though it's watercolor paper and it's thicker, it's still going to have its threshold at some point. So after figuring out the two main problems that I had when I was painting last time, I told myself, okay, let's try and apply what I learned from last time onto this new drawing, and hopefully it will go well. So when I was doing the second drawing, I was like, okay, let's try and focus on the right things to do, which is, number one, we're not going to layer it up like crazy or too thick, because that's just going to ruin the piece, especially because this one is smaller and more detailed. So if there are mess ups, it's going to be way harder to conceal because I don't have that amount of skill when it comes to painting. If there's a mess up in a marker drawing, I'm pretty sure I could try and figure out a way to cover it up or balance it out or something. But when it comes to painting and my lack of skill, that's one where I have to be a little bit more careful of until I can, get a higher, skill in it. I also had another issue when it came up to doing details within a painting like this with such a small drawing. I told myself that it was going to be really difficult, and it kind of is. Even though I have some smaller brushes, I'm not very accurate when it comes to using them, so it gets very messy very easy. So I told myself, why don't I do it in a mixed media way? So instead of just forcing myself to use only the paint, eventually I brought out my color pencils. And that was a really big help to making this drawing look the way I wanted it to look. I'll explain that more later on. Before I went ahead and brought them out though, I did try and layer up the paint to the best of my capability. I made sure not to go overboard with them, and I really wanted to make sure that I was thinning out the paint enough, but not too much, basically getting the right consistency. And the last time I had a good amount of issues with that, but this time, because I'm practicing more with it, it was much easier to do. I of course still do need some more practice with it, because this is my, second time, really using them and not just playing around with them. But I really do feel like, so far, this drawing is a significant upgrade from the portrait that I did last time, which, is only going to happen if you keep practicing at something, and also if you study it really well, or just, take into account the way other people use a product, which is why things like videos and tutorials are so good, because they really do help people learn new ways to do things. Okay, now that I'm happy with the gouache part of the drawing, I can go ahead and use my color pencils on top for details. So if you're curious as to what color pencils I used, I did two different sets. One was the color pencils from Crayola, the Colors of the World skin tone set, and then the other one was a 72 count Prismacolor set that I bought years ago, but I stopped using because it actually hurt my hands to use, and I was having a difficult time with that, so that's why I switched over to markers. But before that, I really wanted to be a color pencil, professional, but eventually, the cards aligned somewhere else, which is cool though. But, because I have this first layer of gouache down for the majority of the color, I can come in and use the color pencils to give the details and make it look nice and sharp in areas that I want it to be. I don't think I would have gotten such nice blend on the blush on the face if I was using just the gouache paint, because I'm not, again, skilled enough to do so. But it's also because gouache can get real messy real easy, and color pencils are much more precise, and I really like precision when it comes to my artwork. It also helped take a lot of pressure off of me thinking I'm gonna mess up the painting, because when I was using the paint, I was nervous that I was gonna mess up at any given point in time, and that it was going to take a really big hurdle to try and fix that. But the color pencils kind of came in and took a load off, so I didn't have to feel like I had to get it perfect right away. So that was nice that I could do that. Plus, I'm really happy that I'm actually using the color pencils, because I don't like wasting supplies again. And I bought these back, I'm gonna say almost 5 years ago, and I haven't really been using them since. So now that I have a reason to use them, it makes me happy, because I don't like wasting things. It's it's like a shame to me. I know everybody feels different about it, but you know, I just want to make sure that if I spend something, like a certain amount on something, I want to use it and all that jazz. Also, on top of all of that, I really like the colored pencil look. I feel like it just looks nice and inviting all the time, so that's something that I really like too. One thing I definitely did learn when it came to using the color pencils on top of the gouache, I noticed that some color pencils were easier to blend on top of it compared to others. Now, I don't know if that's just because of the certain formulas some colors have, or if it's because the gouache is layered on too thick to where it is unable to blend like that. And if that is the case, I'm going to try again with lighter layers next time so I could blend on top instead, or just try and see if different colors react different ways with the painting that I'm going to do in the future. So that's something that I have to take note of. I really like the color selections that I did here, and the blend I feel is really great too. This is like a drawing I'm really proud of, and I'm so glad that I ended up doing and taking the chance on, because I was really nervous painting this because I really liked the sketch, and I didn't want to mess it up because I was like, man, if I mess this up, I might just cry. Anyway, this is the finished drawing, and I'm really happy with it, and I might just try this again with another illustration, but I'm also missing my alcohol markers, so we'll see about that. Thanks for watching, and remember I love you. Bye!